Empires once hoarded treasure openly, but Britain learned how to hide wealth in daylight without being seen. Offshore territories became shadows stretching from London across oceans, carrying secrecy further than soldiers ever travelled before. They were not colonies of land anymore, but colonies of law and banking serving silence and profit. In these islands, money could disappear legally, returning later cleaner, quieter, and strangely more powerful than before. The story began with shipping routes, merchants, and tax laws bending around wines and imperial advantage carefully. Small islands offered flags, courts, and registries willing to host paper empires bigger than their populations today. Ships registered their sailed global waters while obeying friendly rules written far from dangerous ports and storms. What began as convenience slowly evolved into financial architecture, shaping decades of trade and taxation for all. British law travelled with merchants, offering predictability where local systems felt fragile or corrupt to nervous investors. Soon companies incorporated offshore while operating elsewhere, separating activity from responsibility with legal precision approved in London. Profits passed through island entities, shrinking tax bills, while expanding influence and balance sheets for global elites. Every year the structures grew more sophisticated, yet always appeared entirely legal and respectable to outside authorities. Territories like Cayman, Jersey, and Bermuda became silent partners in worldwide trade and finance without speaking loudly. They offered light regulation, flexible incorporation, and secrecy protecting corporate structures from intrusive scrutiny by larger states. Meanwhile, London remained the beating heart connecting offshore networks to mainstream global markets daily, without interruption ever. Money looped between islands and the city, gathering speed while avoiding traditional oversight entirely most of time. This offshore web did not require armies, only paperwork, reputation, and carefully positioned legal jurisdictions to thrive. Companies shifted profits with accounting entries rather than trucks, ships, or factory relocations across continents each year. Governments protested occasionally, yet many relied on offshore systems to attract investment and retain talent despite criticism. Hypocrisy became structural, with outrage spoken publicly, while cooperation continued quietly behind diplomatic doors almost every year. Banks, accountants, and lawyers formed the backbone of this discrete machine supporting offshore capitalism across the world. They structured trusts, shell companies, and layered ownership to conceal ultimate beneficiaries behind complexity when necessary abroad. For wealthy clients, privacy felt like protection against unstable politics, kidnapping, or reputational damage in many countries. For corporations, secrecy provided bargaining power, with governments competing desperately for elusive investments across an uncertain world. Critics argued the offshore system eroded tax bases and undermined democratic accountability everywhere with lasting social consequences. Supporters replied that mobility of capital forced governments to remain competitive and disciplined or lose investment abroad. Between these arguments, the offshore web continued expanding, adjusting to regulation like water avoids rocks with ease. Whenever loopholes closed in one place, new structures opened somewhere quieter, thinner, and more opaque than before. British territories thrived because they combined autonomy with lingering imperial ties and legal familiarity, reassuring nervous investors. Local governments benefited from registration fees, employment, and the prestige of hosting global finance within small communities. Meanwhile, London gained deal flow, influence, and permanent involvement in international financial architecture through offshore connections daily. Power flowed both directions, binding center and periphery through contracts, courts, and shared profits for many decades. Ordinary citizens rarely noticed this hidden geography in governments, cities, and entire economic models behind closed doors. Money traveled invisibly while streets, hospitals, and schools felt the quiet pressure of shrinking revenue over time. Some nations depended on offshore finance for prosperity. Others blamed it for inequality and instability at home. The truth remained complicated, woven from secrecy, history, competition, and the relentless search for advantage among nations. What made the offshore web uniquely British was not location, but trust in familiar legal language worldwide. Contracts written in English and judged by British precedent reassured lenders, insurers, and multinational corporations for decades. As long as that trust endured, offshore territories continued operating as extensions of London's financial reach worldwide. The empire survived not in maps, but in registries, filings, and carefully managed reputations across every ocean. The offshore web remains controversial, resilient, and deeply embedded within the architecture of global finance to this. It reflects human desire for security, secrecy, advantage, and escape from unpredictable political environments across the world. Britain did not abolish risk, but learned to host it profitably under layers of discretion for decades. And wherever wealth fears exposure, the offshore web waits patiently with open ledgers and closed doors nearby. As scrutiny increased, leaks exposed offshore secrecy and challenged public tolerance for invisible wealth migrations worldwide daily. Yet even scandals rarely dismantled the architecture. They simply encouraged quieter routes and more intricate disguises permanently. Governments promised reform, drafting stricter rules, while simultaneously protecting competitiveness for their own financial centers at home. The result was compromise, change announced publicly, while continuity persisted quietly through expert adaptation and legal precision. Meanwhile, London remained the hub where offshore profits re-entered mainstream markets, legitimized by professional assurances and history. Law firms, auditors, and brokers translated secrecy into acceptable structure, keeping transactions compliant yet deliberately opaque globally. For many investors, offshore strategies were less about evasion and more about defensive protection against uncertainty everywhere. But critics argued the same mechanisms enabled corruption, capital flight, and social erosion masked behind diplomatic respectability. Financial institutions balanced ethics with competition, reluctant to abandon profitable networks, while rivals continued using them anyway. Regulators face complex trade-offs between transparency, economic growth, tax fairness, and retaining influence within international finance ecosystems. Public trust rose and fell with every investigation, inquiry, and headline revealing hidden ownership, aggressive avoidance. Yet markets largely continued functioning, adapting structures faster than laws could respond to shifting political pressures globally. Today, the offshore web remains deeply embedded, neither fully accepted nor successfully dismantled by coordinated global policy. It represents both resilience and vulnerability within the modern financial order shaped heavily by British legal heritage. Wealth still searches for safety, flexibility, and discretion, and offshore territories continue offering those advantages with precision. Whether history judges this system essential or exploitative, its roots reveal Britain's enduring mastery of financial architecture. If this story changed how you see secrecy, law, and invisible power shaping global money every day, remember, the greatest empires no longer need armies when contracts and jurisdictions quietly control the world beneath. Subscribe for more untold histories where finance hides in plain sight behind paperwork, precedent, and polished respectability. Because the next financial refuge may already exist offshore, waiting patiently before crises force money toward it.